Sequoia National Park. And I have been a park ranger since about 2005, so quite a long time. Like most park rangers, I bounced around as a seasonal for a long time. But increasing the diversity of our workforce is something that is really important to me. And bringing new students into government is also really important to me. So I'm here to help you today with figuring out how to make a really good federal resume and how to find jobs to apply for, and then hopefully actually get them. And I will let Christina introduce herself. Oh, I almost forgot. This is me in my park. And here's Christina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Martinez, and like Emily said, I also work here, not too far from Fresno in Sequoia National Park. And I've been a seasonal park ranger for the Park Service since 2017, but I did start off as an intern in the summer of 2016. Other parks that I've worked at include Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve in Alaska, as you can see here in this photo, me in front of a glacier. So, I'm a seasonal employee. So sometimes we do get the opportunity to travel to many different places. And that's one way to be able to see the amazing diversity that we have in the country when it comes to ecosystems, but also to just also meet other people. I've met and made some really great friends through working with the Park Service, and that community is really, really important, especially when it comes to trying to figure out what will be your next park, especially as a seasonal employee. And Emily will definitely give you a little bit more background as to the different types of employees in the agency.
Yeah, so Christina and I are obviously biased because we work for the National Park Service. We think it's a great agency, but this workshop is going to be more generally about jobs in the federal government. So we'll talk a little bit from our experience about the Park Service, but also more generally for those of you who don't want to work in a national park. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how to find jobs. We are going to talk about how to build a federal resume, which is going to blow your mind because it is nothing like any other kind of resume. We're also going to talk about what to add to your application once you submit it, and then what to expect after you apply, because it also works a little differently with federal hiring than it does with pretty much anywhere else. So let's get started on how to find jobs. And the place that all federal positions are posted is usajobs.gov. Super simple. When you go on there, you'll see various ways to search. But the most important thing about any job that you need to pay attention to is whether or not you're going to be eligible in the first place. And every job that you see posted is based on some sort of hiring authority. Something gives us permission to go out and hire people for that position. And you can see a few of the different hiring paths or authorities on the screen there. Some of them are very broad, open to the public, for example. Anyone in the United States who is a US citizen can apply for one of those jobs. So US citizens, nationals, or people who owe allegiance to the US. Some of the hiring pathways are more specific. If you're a veteran, you can apply for certain jobs that nobody else can. You can also get special preference when you apply for a job that puts you above other candidates in consideration. And some of these other hiring pathways are like that too. I wanted to point out a few that make it easier to make the list of candidates that get considered. Those are the ones in red there. So as people who are students or recent graduates, you have a leg up over the general public on certain positions. Also, if you are an individual with a disability, you're eligible for something called Schedule A. That gives you a special preference. The veterans we talked about, military spouses are another one. And then there are, it's kind of vague on this screen, but it refers to special authorities. And those might be things like direct hire. For certain positions that require special skills, an agency can just say, send me resumes, and we can reach out and pick any person that we think is best qualified for that job. Also, Public Lands Corps is another one. Christina will have links for you later that talk about internships, and often with internships, you can get public lands corps hiring authority that makes you eligible for positions that other people are not, or makes it easier for agencies to hire you directly. So just to give you the big picture, as a selecting official, I get a list of candidates. Some people I have to consider before others. Usually that's veterans, but it might be some of these other people that are on the screen before you. So anytime you can make that list of candidates that I have to consider, that's a bonus for you. I don't want to belabor that point too much. Just when you go on USA Jobs, look for this exploring hiring paths at the bottom. It's the easiest way to find positions that are directly for students or veterans or whoever. So when you go on USA Jobs, this is what you will see. I'm going to share a different screen with you here. Are you guys seeing USA Job Search?
Yes, we can see it.
Super. Okay. So I have filtered things down to find some examples of jobs that recent graduates who have a bachelor's degree are going to be eligible for. And I did that by just clicking on that students and recent graduates button on the page I showed you a second ago, and then using the filters over on the side here to narrow things down a little. So if you look at the filters, you'll see that recent graduates is clicked. And then for grade level, I selected GS, stands for General Schedule, 4 through 6. Those are kind of entry-level positions. Things like a GS7, entry level would require, for GS9, entry level would require a master's degree. If it's going to be a GS10 or 11, often a PhD is required. And then some of these very high grade levels would be like the person in charge of the whole park, which obviously as somebody coming directly out of school is not you. But GS 4 through 6 might be good targets for you. And then I also just narrowed down department and agency a little to help out with finding interesting positions to look at. So I specifically want to show you what this financial specialist position looks like. If you are a student who majored in business or accounting, this might be a job that you would be interested in. So on the job announcement, you're going to see all kinds of helpful information. You see open and closing dates, the pay scale, which is set. There's no negotiating salaries in the federal government. So if you want to look up what the pay would be, you can. The appointment type here is listed as permanent. So this would be a position if you have just graduated in the last 2 years and you're looking for a job that's going to take all year long and that you can stay in for a while, this would be for you. There's the salary listed, and then the work schedule is full-time.
It looks like we can't see the right page that you're on.
Oh,
We just see
no.
the-
Okay. Let me see if I have to share that page specifically. How about now?
Yes, we can see it now. And
Okay.
there was a question on the previous page on how to filter out the GS levels.
So on the right-hand side of the search, you'll see a little button that you click for grade, and then you can click on multiple of those grade levels.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, so back to that financial specialist position. Since you couldn't see it before, here's the overview section that I just walked you through. On the right-hand side, it tells you the job is open to recent graduates, and it tells you what that means. And then pretty much every job you see posted is also going to be open to people who have been laid off from another agency. That's just kind of a requirement. We try to find homes for those people if they've been laid off. So the location, you'll notice this job is in Herndon, Virginia. Location is something that you can filter for. So if you really want to stay close to home, or you want to stay in California, or on the other end of the spectrum, if you want to go on a major adventure and spend some time in Southeast Alaska, You can filter for location and figure out what jobs are open in the place that you want to move to. Relocation expenses are often reimbursed once you already work for the federal government. So if you're getting promoted or moving to a new job, usually, but not always, they will pay for your move, which is, I tell you, it's magical. As somebody who moved a lot, they come and they pack up your stuff, they put it in a truck, and you just meet them on the other side. It's great. Telework eligible is something that has changed a lot during the pandemic. So even though this job is located in Herndon, Virginia, you might be able to negotiate and work from California most of the time. That would be between you and the hiring official. And then you will see a list of duties. The summary is honestly sometimes kind of useless. It doesn't tell you a whole lot about the job, but if you look at the responsibilities, that's where you start to understand more about it. And this job is fantastic because it's what we call a ladder position. So you will start as a GS5, and if you do a good job, in about a year, you get promoted to the next grade level, not automatically, but with some certainty. And then I think this one tops out at a GS9. So these positions are great because you get increased responsibility along the way. You learn a lot. And then at the end of whenever you're ready to move on, you're ready for a higher grade level. So under the responsibilities, it's going to tell you at the full performance level. So by the time you get to the top of your game in this job, these are the things that they're going to expect you to be able to do. And then often they will also lay out the responsibilities at lower grade levels. Let's see, just move this out of the way. I also have here a search I set up that is for internships, so not recent graduates, but people who are currently enrolled and that are temporary. And I did this because I want to point out that even if you're still in school, there are often positions that are open just for the summer. I posted a couple of those about 2 or 3 weeks ago, people that I would like to work from, say, mid-June to mid-August. So you can be here during your summer break and then go back to school in the fall. So these are some examples of those positions. And you'll see that they have extra little icons over here that tell you a little bit more about the jobs because they are more limited. And then I want to show you one of those announcements specifically. This is with Department of Agriculture. Agricultural Research Service is related to the U.S. Forest Service. So if you go up to Shaver Lake or you come out to Sequoia National Forest, not the park, then you would be in the U.S. Forest Service land. So these are people who might work in a place like that. So this one, it tells you they're hiring at multiple grade levels. It is an internship and it's temporary. So the end date for your appointment would be August 31st. You might be able to end earlier than that if you need to. But as one of these special pathways or student positions, you could keep working if they have the money and they like you and they want to keep you. And then always check the clarification from the agency stuff. It's important to decide whether you're eligible. So here are oh goodness, there's a ton of locations that they're hiring for. California, Kansas, Idaho, Maryland, who knows what the other ones are. So this is like a joint announcement for several positions. It talks about the duties. And when I saw this, I thought, oh, plant sciences students, this is you. You can go and work for the Forest Service for the summer and pick up some real life skills and all of these responsibilities that have to do with maintaining plants in a greenhouse or growing native species for restoration projects. And then it goes through the eligibility for different grade levels that they're hiring at. And then I think later on, yep, it tells you which positions they're actually looking to fill. So if you know that you are in your second year as a student, you would be eligible after completing that first full year for a GS3 position. And you can see, well, where are they hiring GS3s? There's no point in applying to Du Bois or Manhattan, or sorry, Logan, Utah, or Albany, California, because they're only looking for GS4s and 5s. All right, so one more thing I want to point out on here, just as a heads up, this is something that caught us by surprise the first year they did it, and it was kind of a nightmare. Sometimes there's a limit on the number of applicants they'll accept for a position. So you might see a closing date of March 19th, and then you'll see a little warning box on the side that says applications limited to the first 50. So what that means is once they get 50 applicants, midnight of that day, they close the announcement down. And there are some positions that are super popular. Like if you wanted to be a GS5 park ranger at the Grand Canyon, if that was your dream, when that job announcement comes out, it's going to have an applicant limit, and you really better apply that first day, because chances are 400 to 500 people will apply on that first day and it will close at midnight. So just watch out for that. Like I said, it caught us by surprise the first time. All right, so that's how you find jobs. If you have questions about how that works, go ahead and put them in the chat to Christina and she'll help you out as much as she can. Let's go back to lovely PowerPoint. All right, are you guys seeing the PowerPoint on screen?
Yes.
Super, okay. So we have now covered how to find jobs. Next, we're gonna talk about how to build a federal resume. And this is the part that I promised you is gonna blow your mind, because everything that you have been taught about how to make a good resume, I want you to just put that in a box in your brain and set it aside for a little while. Don't forget it, because you're still going to need it if you're applying for jobs that are not federal, but you're going to have to do things completely differently for building a federal resume. Don't let that scare you though. It's really good practice, and you might find things as you're building your federal resume that you're like, oh man, I need to add that to my other one too. So the deal with a federal resume is that you are not using it to give the person you're applying to a brief little summary of who you are. Instead, your cover letter is going to do that. What you use your federal resume for is to justify that you are eligible for the position you're applying for. It's a subtle difference in purpose, but it makes a big difference in what you include. So let's say you wanted to apply for that plant technician job that I showed a minute ago. You would want to take a look at the duties that are listed. And if you can see the assessment questionnaire, it's going to be a little quiz that you take where you rate yourself and your knowledge in various things. If you can see that ahead of time, take a look at it. And what you're going to do with your resume is you're going to show that you know how to do some of those things, that you've been trained in it, or that you've done it independently on the job, or that you've actually supervised other people doing it. Because when you apply and you answer that quiz about what you know how to do, you're going to rate yourself as being trained, having done it independently or under close supervision, having supervised others in the task. And when somebody looks at your resume, they have to see it in your resume as being true, or they're going to say, oh, this person just lied on their application, so we're not going to accept them as a candidate. So what that means is that your resume should be pages long. I don't know, Christina, if you're willing to say in the chat, like how many pages your resume is approximately. At times, mine has been like 10 to 15 pages long. They get pretty intense. So we'll talk about how to wrangle that in a little bit. But I do want to point out there are some things that you absolutely have to include on your resume. So for sure, for every position that you're in, you need to include the start date and the end date with the month and the year, and how many hours per week you work. There are some positions that you can qualify for based on education or experience or a combination of the two. And in order to prove that you have the experience, you have to show what % of full time you worked for how long. So make sure you include those things. And then you also should include, or really must include, the salary or the equivalent grade level. The equivalent grade level gets kind of tricky. There are ways to look that up. So if I am talking to you as a person who has not worked for the federal government and you need help figuring out what grade level your experience might come in at, feel free to email me and I'll try to help you out. I can't claim I'm an expert in it, but I can give you some idea of where to start. So I do want to point out that the reason we ask for salary is to figure out what level of responsibility you probably had in that job. If you tell me that you were an intern working for free and you were the director of the organization, that's going to make me scratch my head and ask a lot of questions. On the other hand, if you tell me that you were a shift manager and the duties that you're listing look to me like they might have been maybe a little more responsibility than somebody who's just looking after people who already know what they're doing, that might make me think, well, maybe they, equivalent thing in my world would be a little bit higher than that. Maybe they were like a lead for the summer or a supervisor. So make sure you include that salary or grade level. And then things to maybe include with each entry would be your references. This doesn't bother me personally. I've talked to hiring officials though who say if somebody doesn't include their supervisor as a reference, that's a big red flag for me. So do include your references if you're comfortable doing that. And you can even include like contact me first if it's somebody who doesn't know that you're applying for other jobs and you don't want them caught by surprise. And then you can also include peer and subordinate references. If your supervisor has moved on and you have absolutely no way to contact them, a peer reference or somebody that you supervised would be a good one to list. And then because you're probably got work experience or volunteer experience coming from wherever, make sure that you also include just a really brief mission statement for each place that you work so that we have some context for the duties that you're doing. Like you may list the name of the company, and if I don't know what they do, it's hard for me to understand the duties that you're listing or the accomplishments that you're listing. There are some things that you absolutely should not put on your resume, and this is for your protection. Don't include your social security number, and then don't include anything that's going to give away what we call your protected class. I have some examples on the screen there, but Christina is going to drop a link in the chat that talks about more protected classes. These are things that it is not legal for us to discriminate against you for. So anything that's going to, give that away, like a photo, for example, that might show your skin color or your, the way you present your gender or your age. Those are things that you definitely don't want to include, and you certainly don't want to list them in your resume. You don't want to say like, well, I am a 41-year-old Caucasian female. It might prejudice a hiring official against you, even though they know they have to like close their mind to that information. I know it's the kind of thing, some people have a photo attached to their email account, and when they send me an email, that photo shows up and it's like, no, I didn't want to see that because I don't want to know. So just be really careful with your resume and consider taking your photo off of whatever account you're using to email people about jobs. So if you have questions about the things that absolutely have to go in your resume or absolutely should not go in your resume, let Christina know in the chat. She'll try to answer those questions for you. But I do want to tell you, I look at about 400 resumes every summer. And that means I have some strong opinions about what makes a resume good and makes me want to consider that person as a candidate. So some of the things that you've learned about how to write a good resume are still going to apply to this bigger, more detailed federal resume that you write. So these probably don't sound unfamiliar to you. But in that resume, I want to see that you have been learning and progressing toward a clear goal. So your goal may change partway through your college career, and that is fine. I would just like to see some sort of explanation that helps me interpret your resume so that I understand that you had this eureka moment and you decided you were in the wrong field, but you were going to switch, and you're doing it with intention, that you're not just kind of drifting aimlessly about changing your major or changing your career goals every few months. So one way to do that in your resume is to show how your responsibilities increase over time. I will actually show you my resume at some point during this, and you'll be able to see how I chose to do that in my resume. You should also, in your resume, show that you take advantage of or even create opportunities to build your skills. List those training courses that you're taking. I've seen a lot of resumes that have a section in the education portion that shows courses that they've taken that are relevant to the kind of positions that they're applying for. So if you're a plant sciences major and you've taken an internship, or you've taken specific biology or chemistry courses that are relevant to the job, make sure you list those by course name so that the person reading it can understand. Also, if you've had a coach or a mentor who's helped you understand what you're doing in the job and what works and what doesn't work and helped you be better at it, list that as an experience or an accomplishment for that position. And then same thing for special projects. If you dreamed up a special project in that job as a way to learn more, go ahead and put that in your resume. Also, show me that you are always being productive. I know it's tough. Over the course of a lifetime, you might take time out to help out family members, or to have a kid, or just take time between high school and college because you're not sure what you want to do next. Don't just leave those gaps sitting there in your resume. Show me that you were being productive during those. So it can just be a sentence between entries if that's what it takes. Like you could say, I graduated high school and I knew college was a big commitment and I wasn't sure where I wanted to go. So here are some things I experimented with to see if any of them appealed. And this is the one that helped me figure out what I wanted to do. So just address those gaps in there somewhere. The good thing about these really long resumes is it gives you more freedom to do that. And then for each position, know what tasks are core to the position and how you contributed to them. So a good way to do that in your resume is to separate your core duties from any special projects or special accomplishments that you did along the way. And it's also great to include metrics. If you were working in a restaurant and part of your duty was to open and close a certain number of days a week, say, I independently opened and closed my restaurant this many days per week. And then last point here, just show me that you're conscientious and that you're considerate of other people, including me as the person reading your resume. Get feedback on the format, get feedback on the content, have somebody else look it over and make sure it makes sense and it's easy to read and it does what you intend for it to do before you send it off to a selecting official as part of your application. All right, that was kind of a blitz of information about what to do. If you have questions about how to handle that in your own resume, I might be able to help you. I'm not sure if Christina is willing, but she might be able to. So try to contact us. And then if you have questions, again, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'm going to take just a second to show you my resume. Where did it go? All right, here we go. Uh-oh, lost it. Okay, so hopefully you guys are seeing my resume on the screen right now. I did redact my phone number and my personal email address because I love you.
Yes, we can see it, Emily.
Oh, really? Okay, well, now you know where I live. That's
No,
cool.
no, oh, no, not your address, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you want to drop by for a visit, just give me an email. But this is a choice that I made because I think it's important that I went to grad school. That was a huge commitment on my part. I did a thesis and that, it was tough. So I put that, right at the beginning because it is relevant to everything that I want to do with the rest of my life. It is actually the reason that I went back to grad school and got that thesis or got that master's degree. I did include my GPA and number of semester hours. That's going to be really important if you're trying to qualify based on education, so make sure you include that. And then for my work experience, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, probably pretty small on your screens, but I have divided my positions into core duties and skills and special accomplishments. Are you guys seeing that? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. It's a little small, but we can see it.
Okay. So I did that because I'm going to actually zoom in on one of these. So this position is one of those ladder positions that I was talking about. So I started out at a low grade level and I worked my way up to a higher one. So under core duties and skills, you can see this progression that I'm talking about. At the very first grade level, this is all I was doing as part of the core part of my job. I was learning how to give public programs. As I moved up, I added other responsibilities to that. So you can see, I then started doing stuff with our websites, and I took over part of Washington, D.C. has this enormous July 4th celebration, and I took over coordination of part of that for my park. And then at the highest grade level, I learned a lot about how to do curriculum-based education programs. And I started creating maps and brochures and managing the park social media presence. And then you can see I've picked out a few special accomplishments and projects that I worked on. Those were things that I thought might be interesting to somebody who's wanting to hire me. So anytime I got like a big chunk of money, I would include the amount in there, $20,000 in this grant. Probably should have put the number of interns in there. That would have been interesting to people, but that gives you some sense of like one way to handle this. And then you can also see, this is a great example of a job that I was in a while ago, and my supervisors both retired. There's really no way to contact them. So I had to list peer references instead. And like I said, that's perfectly fine. It's understandable. If you are one of the graduate students in this program, anytime you have a publication, list that in there too. I can tell you, my husband has a PhD. I have had my thesis downloaded more times than he's had his dissertation downloaded. And I think it's often because people look it up when they want to learn about me as a job candidate. So if you have publications, include those in your resume too. All right, enough about me. Let's move back to our lovely PowerPoint.
Emily, there's a question about calculating semester hours. Is that just the units earned?
I don't want to go too into the weeds on that, but if you look around on the Office of Personnel Management website, like if you just do an internet search for OPM semester hours qualifications, that'll help you figure out how to do that. It gets a little tricky. But units don't, it's just semester hours that matter. You should be able to pull that from your transcript. And then you can also put quarter hours if you went to another institution that used quarter hours instead. Sorry, that's not more helpful.
Thank you. And I believe Christina's going to drop the link.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right. So also, I don't know if you guys heard that, but there's turkeys in the background here. I'm not the one gobbling, it's them. Okay, So we've talked about how to find jobs, how to make your really detailed federal resume. And now I want to talk about what to add to your application. And this is going to vary a little bit depending on how you're trying to qualify for the job, what hiring authority it's under. That's why it's important to pay close attention to the job announcement. It will actually list in there what to include, but don't take that at face value. Read through the whole thing and keep notes to yourself somewhere about, oh, I need to include this and this and this. So always, you're going to include your resume. You won't have a choice about that. When you hit the little apply button on USA Jobs, that's the first thing it's going to ask you to do is attach your resume. There are other things that you may need to include. If you're applying for one of those student positions, you're going to need to include your transcript. It can be an unofficial one, that's fine. And it just needs to show that you'll still be enrolled when the job starts, if that's a requirement for that position. If you're a recent graduate, it just needs to show that you graduated in the last 2 years. But for like the student positions that I work to fill, you would need to show that you are not a graduating senior, that you're planning to be enrolled next semester. And then if you are a veteran and you're using that as your as part of your qualifications, you would need to upload paperwork that proves that you were a veteran. If you're a veteran with a disability, you would upload that. It'll give you guidance on what to look for. But I did want to talk specifically about cover letters because I feel like that's a big, scary thing for people to write. I know I hate writing cover letters. I never know what to say. I don't like talking about myself, and it's just really awkward. But because your resume may run to 15 or 20 pages, a cover letter is really helpful. As somebody who's looking at all those resumes, it helps me make sense of you. Like, who are you? What are you doing? And why are you applying to this job? And because the resumes are so long, you should not be personalizing those for specific applications. Instead, use your cover letter to show why you're qualified for that specific position. So this is just some very basic advice from me. This is based on my experience. I wouldn't say it's universal, but I think it's good advice. Shoot for about 3 paragraphs. They don't have to be long, just 3 to 7 sentences each. Paragraph number 1, give me a quick introduction to you. What are you doing right now? Tell me if you're a student and you're enrolled and you're studying something that's relevant to the job. Then, second paragraph, what do you hope to do and why is this job relevant? I want to know that this is part of your plan, that you aren't applying for this job just because you want the money. I want to know that it's part of what you enjoy doing and what brings meaning to your life. And then paragraph number 3, tell me what special skills, interests, or attitudes you have that are going to benefit me and the other people that you're working with in this park or wherever you're applying to. So you do want to keep it focused on you, but you do want to make it clear to the hiring official or selecting official that you bring something special to the job that's going to benefit them. One of the interview questions that I usually ask people is, what makes you want to work specifically in the foothills of Sequoia National Park? And I can't tell you how many people have told me exclusively their answer is, well, I've never been to California and I want to explore it. And like, that's great. I'm glad you're excited about California, but that tells me nothing about why I would want to facilitate your exploration of California. So just keep in mind that you're trying to convince the employer that you have something of value to offer. And I know you do. So just tell me about it. All right, so that's what to include with your application. It's easy to get too specific on that, but if you have questions, again, put them in the chat or contact one of us after the webinar and let us know. We'll try to help you figure out what needs to be included. All right, moving on, what to expect after you apply. So I will tell you up front, there are new assessment questionnaires that you have to do after you apply. And some of them are super simple. You're just rating how much you know about certain tasks on the job. And then there's also this kind of overwhelming assessment battery. They used to do civil service exams in the federal government, and they stopped doing those. because they were discriminatory. And it was about 20 or 30 years that we have not had civil service exams. And they started adding this assessment battery back in. So you might have to take an assessment where you're asked to watch videos of different scenarios and then decide what the best response would be. So it's like occupational judgment. I've taken one that's like reading comprehension. I've taken one that is logic, and I felt like a blithering idiot afterwards. It was really hard. So having taken those, they will tell you it only takes 3 hours. They'll tell you you can do it anywhere. Don't believe it. It takes longer, and you should make sure that you are somewhere that you can concentrate. Be somewhere quiet where you don't have any distractions. Some of them are time tests, so it helps. Don't let it stress you out though. I don't know how much people actually use those assessment batteries when they're figuring out who to hire. They are optional too, so it may be something that you don't face. And the best news is you take it once and you're done for the year. You don't have to take it again for another 12 months. So after you apply, you're going to get prompts. Keep an eye on your email inbox and your spam folder to make sure that you don't have to do anything else with your application. And then expect to have a long wait. It feels like it will never end as a job candidate. Christina's laughing in there. Like, it's so stressful. I'm not going to lie. It is not unusual for you to put your application in and then not hear anything for 4 weeks. And it's not because nothing is happening. It's because a lot of things are happening. So here's what happens after you apply. The announcement closes, and then human resources is going to take all of the candidates, look at their resumes, and decide whether each of them meets the minimum qualifications for the job. So when they're done with that, you're going to get an automated email that tells you whether you were considered eligible or not eligible for the job. And then they take all of the people who applied and they put them into categories of best qualified, well qualified, or qualified. And then they send a list of candidates to the selecting official. And usually they only send the best qualified list. So when they send a list, you're going to get another of those automated emails that tells you whether or not you were referred. If you were referred, that means your name was passed along to the selecting official and you're a legit person for them to consider. So at that point, the selecting official is going to get that list of candidates, and because it's been quite a while since the application closed and people's lives continue to move on, they're going to reach out and see who is still interested and available. When they do that, that's all they want to know. Are you still interested in the job, and can you start when we need you to start?
Hi, Emily. I know you're talking about best qualified, well qualified, or qualified. Someone did have a question that said if you will still be able to see their resume if other applicants that are veterans or special hires, meaning will their application automatically be filtered out? So maybe elaborate on, best qualified and how hiring authorities influence those lists.
Sure. So I should be specific. This is for most jobs, not all of them, but it's called category ranking. And as a selecting official, what I see is a list of all the best qualified people. If there weren't many of them, sometimes they'll also add the well-qualified people. And the people who have special preference, like if you're a veteran, your name will float to the top of the list. And before I can consider anybody who's not at the top of that list in that pool of preference eligible candidates, I have to either hire those people or they have to decide that they're not actually interested in the position. So I will still see your information. I just may not be able to reach you on the list of candidates. For example, this summer, we were looking for about 4 or 5 park rangers in my division. And I think we had 10 or so veterans, preference eligible candidates on the list. And we had to work through those 10 people before we could select anybody who was not a veteran. But I think maybe all of them decided to take jobs somewhere else. So we did actually reach that list of best qualified candidates and could go with them. All right. So, and I do want to point out that's different for some jobs. That's true for this category ranking system. If you want to really dig into the details, if you look at the job announcement, it'll tell you what they plan to do with the candidates after you apply. All right, so we were on checking to see who's still interested and available. After I find out who's still interested and available, I usually do things in this order. I will read every single resume. So know that as you're putting your resume together, it's not for nothing. Someone will look at it. And then I select people to interview and I reach out and say, hey, when would be a good time to talk? And then I interview people, I make reference checks, and then I make an offer to somebody. And I usually give that person, a couple days, depending on how rushed everything is and what day of the week it is, to actually really consider the position and decide whether or not they want to accept it. So that's how federal hiring goes. You can see how it would take quite a while to work through this. If you're ever in doubt about what point you're at in the hiring process, you can log back into USA Jobs and take a look at the positions you've applied for and check to see where the hiring process is. So, I do want to tell you that we need you. We need people with fresh ideas, and we need people to help the federal government be more representative of the people it serves. So please consider applying for these federal positions. They do pay well, and they do come with solid benefits. They're a great option. They're also, if you're looking at summer seasonal positions, a great way to get paid experience. These are not unpaid internships. So I'm hoping that I start seeing your names on some of our lists of candidates in the future. I'm happy to serve as a resource for you. And I think Christina is too, as long as she's here. So we'll end there with the formal part of this, but now would be a great time if you have questions for me.
Emily, I have a question. I am a career advisor with the College of Science and Math and Engineering. And sometimes I get students in very specific majors that are open to other career pathways. For example, maybe a pre-med student that as they get closer to graduation, they decide that they don't want to go that route anymore. And they're open to more ecology, working outdoors. So maybe for a student that hasn't had a lot of experience volunteering or these type of experiences, how would you recommend maybe a way into this career pathway?
So I would say first and foremost, be reasonable about what kind of position you're going to apply for. So don't expect to come in at an entry level if you're making a big change like that. And I know with the Park Service, if you can work for if you apply for jobs that are less popular, you're more likely to get them if you don't have as much experience there. And then in your resume, you're going to want to pull out the things that are relevant from the work and the learning that you did do. So there's probably a seed of something in there that's helpful, and just make sure you highlight that. And then those other things that I was talking about to include in your resume that show that you're progressing from position to position on purpose, and that you make opportunities for yourself to learn things and build your skills. Those are kind of softer things that are not highly technical that will still impress people. So make sure that those are really obvious too.
For the summer opportunities that you have, are those posted in USA Jobs or?
Yep, it's a requirement. Everything has to be on USA Jobs.
I can
And
also,
sorry, go ahead.
I can also elaborate on other internship opportunities that are paid, that are in partnership between nonprofit organizations and land management agencies. So a lot of these positions are national parks, Forest Service sites, Bureau of Land Management sites. And a lot of these internships vary from getting people introduced to interpretation, which is what Emily and I do. We educate the public, but maybe you don't want to do that, and that's okay. There are other internship programs that are more focused on giving students or young adults and aspiring professionals experience in land management, like natural resource type of work. So I'll definitely be dropping those internships in the chat. A lot of these internships do cater towards identities that we don't see represented in the land management workforce. So in my introduction, I said that I started off with the Park Service as an intern in 2016 through the Latino Heritage Internship Program. And the point of that program was to introduce more Latinx identifying individuals into Park Service careers, because we don't have, basically demographics don't represent the national demographics. We definitely need, like Emily said, our workforce to reflect the communities that it serves. And so I benefited from that paid internship program. So I'll be sharing all of these internships in the chat, and definitely, obviously a lot of these are for the summer, so their application process has already passed, but there are others that do occasionally do like fall internships if you have the time for that. But I'll be dropping those in the chat, and I really encourage you all to keep those in mind for sure.
And I just wanted to say, I forgot to mention earlier when we were on USA Jobs that you can save searches, and it's really helpful to have those the results emailed to you like once a day or once a week. Things can move really fast. Most jobs are only open for about a week or two. And if you don't search it often, you might miss something. So it's pretty intuitive how to do that, I think. More questions. I see one in the chat about being a green card holder. You'll have to look at the job specifically and see whether or not you're eligible. You probably know more about that than I do. I can say I've investigated whether people who are here under DACA are eligible for positions, and it depends on the agency. So if that's you, if you're concerned that you are not like obviously eligible, reach out to the person who's listed as the hiring guru at the bottom of the job announcement, and they can tell you whether or not you can apply. And I will say to like, be really educated yourself about what your status is, because you may have to feed that person a lot of information for them to answer your question correctly.
On that same note, for international students, maybe some of the internships or student jobs that don't require like federal clearance or some type of clearance, are those opportunities also available to them?
Yes, I think so. Again, it's going to depend on who the person providing the opportunity is and how it gets set up, but it's not out of the question. I think you probably, as an international student, have more luck with an internship than you would with an actual federal position.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Oh, and there is a question in the chat about whether volunteer work counts. Absolutely, yes. It doesn't have to be paid employment. Volunteer employment counts as well. So make sure that's listed on your resume with the responsibilities that you had. Same way you would any other entry, just the salary is going to be 0.
And on that same topic, are there volunteer opportunities with, for example, a National Park Service?
Oh, yeah. I have a full-time volunteer here in the foothills essentially all year long, and it comes with free housing. So you have to work 32 hours a week. You're here for 4 8-hour days, but then you get your housing paid for, because that's the best I can do. I wish I could offer a stipend to go with it, but it's not legal. So yeah, you can volunteer with the National Park Service. Good place to look for that would be volunteer.gov. And you can filter there if you do need housing, or if you're looking in a specific area, you can filter that down to find those opportunities. We've got about 3 minutes left. So let me know if you have more questions.
There's another question about how many people usually get selected for interviews.
So it depends. I would say from my experience, because I'm drawing from a pool of people who have likely applied to many other national parks, I tend to have to interview more candidates because some of them are going to be offered jobs somewhere else and take them. So for one position here, I usually end up interviewing somewhere between 10 and 15 candidates, and then maybe making an offer to 1 or 2. But that number will be lower if you are applying for a less popular position. Like somebody, I know at this level in my career, when I get interviewed, I'm usually one of the top like 3 or 4 people being considered, and that's all they'll interview because they're pretty sure if they offer the job, I'm not going to say no because I want it.
And I do see the links that Christina's posting for the attendees. I wanted to point out in the chat, I believe all you students should see 3 little dots, and they may give you an option to save chat. That way you as an attendee can download all this and don't have to worry about copying and pasting everything.
And I'll send Damien my notes too. And I think Christina had all of those links listed somewhere else. So Damien, I'll make sure you have those for anybody who wants them.
Awesome. Thank you. Then there looks like there's one last one. When we get emailed, if we get referred to the next process of the recruitment process, do we also get an email saying if we did not get moved on to the next step?
Yes, but remember there are multiple stages in there. So the very first one is, are you eligible? You'll get an email that tells you if you're not eligible. And then the next step is, are you in the list of candidates the person can consider? And you'll get an email that says yes or no. But after that, usually you don't get anything until the hiring process is complete. So like if you're selected for an interview, you kind of have a good sense of what's going on. But if you are not selected for an interview, like 3 or 4 weeks later, you may just get an email saying, oh, we selected someone else. So there can be gaps in there.
And question on for my purposes, sometimes I suggest students maybe consider things to say in interviews, but are there any things that you should maybe not say during an interview or to not disqualify themselves or anything like that? Any pet peeves from interviewees?
Not knowing anything about the position is a big one.
Okay.
Like,
Pay attention, students, pay attention.
yeah, spend some time on our website, learn about the place that you're being offered the job, read everything that I send you carefully, because I can also tell you we have this big, you know, if we get 400 or 500 candidates, we use a spreadsheet to organize them, and we have a notes section, and if we ask you to not do something and then you do that, that goes in the notes and you get flagged as somebody who can't follow instructions, and probably you're not going to get considered for that job. So read the emails that we send you very carefully, do the things that we ask you to do, don't do the things that we ask you not to do, and then think before you do something that's in between those.
Thank you for that.
No problem.
All right, with that, it's 1 o'clock, so we will finish our webinar here for today. So for all of you students who register to attend this webinar, I will send an email out to you with Emily and Christina's email addresses. So if you have any other questions, you can email them. And I also believe, Emily, you said you would email me your PowerPoint, and then I can email that out to all of you as well, the students. So with that said, thank you again, Emily and Christina, for your valuable information that you share with us today. And yeah, thank you for attending, and have a good afternoon.